Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my Saturday Hodgepodge, my weekly wrap-up of my reading, booktube, bookish things, anything else I want to talk about. I want to start off today by talking about what I've been reading. You know, it's Victober, and I'm kind of down to one Victober read at this point. I've been juggling some other things going on, and so I haven't been doing as much reading in the last week as I would have liked. And what I'm reading right now is Adam Bede by George Eliot. And I will say that I think I'm about 190 pages in. I think the book's around 430 pages long in the edition that I have of it. And I am enjoying it. I will say that it might have been a bad idea to read Anthony Trollope, whose writing I really like, and then go to George Eliot, an author who I've read less, and who, in all honesty, this reading of Adam Bede is kind of my way of avoiding reading, the really long, colossally long Middlemarch, and still getting a taste of George Eliot, who, in a longer form. The only other George Eliot book I've read is Silas Marner, which I quite liked, but, it's not very long, and Adam Bede is longer. And so, I think that may explain why I'm finding it hard to stay engaged with Adam Bede and with Eliot's writing. I think she is capable in Adam Bede, and I think this might have been her first big novel, I'm not sure. In Adam Bede, she's capable of some just truly beautiful image creating, and there's some passages which, when I finish the book, I want to kind of give some examples of what I just think are just absolutely stunningly beautiful writing in Adam Bede, which I assume she carries over in her other works, and which I remember being present in Silas Marner as well. But she also takes me out of the novel. In Adam Bede, there are long descriptions of gardens and nature and all these kind of things, and they're beautiful. But I'm kind of at the point now where she's done such a great job of creating, I think, compelling characters. Primarily Adam Bede, and I think his love interest, Hetty, right now in the first part of the book, are really compelling characters that I want to see how that works out. Now, this should sound like I'm just being a big hypocrite, because I always claim I'm not a plot-driven reader, but in this case I have an idea about what I think is going to happen. There's some foreshadowing in the book, etc. I have an idea of what I think is going to happen, and I'm kind of anxious to get to the action. And so, long scenes in which Adam walks out to, a neighborhood farm and, walks through the garden, and we have like a page and a half a description of all the things during the garden, are a little frustrating for me right now. And I think that if I weren't kind of so curious to see if I'm right about the plot of Adam Bede, that I might be more, interested in those things. I will also say that the dialogue of the novel is written in a dialect which I'm sure is accurately rendered, but which I am finding right now kind of difficult to stay engaged with. That it's just, it's just so, the dialect is so thickly rendered on the page that it can be off-putting. Now, not all characters speak with that dialect, because Eliot is showing us the difference in education levels between the different characters. But the characters who are, let's say, the poorest, the uneducated, their dialect is so kind of dense with this. Their dialogue is so dense with this dialect that it does take me out of the book from time to time. So what I'm doing is that I'm just kind of trying to focus on reading about 30 to 40 pages at a time, and then letting myself rest. But I am on the whole enjoying it. I want to give the impression I don't like it, and I'm not making judgment about the book as a whole before it's over, because I am invested in the plot. I mentioned that I was reading this as an ebook on my Kindle, and I certainly am. But I just want to put out a warning about ebooks and classics. So one of the great things I like about reading classics, being a cheap person who doesn't want to spend a lot of money on books that I'm not sure of, is that I can, get an e-copy of a book like Adam Bede on my Kindle for just a few dollars. But what I forgot was, and I brought this up about print books before, what I forgot was that when these books go out of copyright, that anybody can essentially just print the text, and I think there are quite a few people out there, or organizations out there, willing to print inaccurate versions of the text, or poorly paginated versions of these texts. And that happened to me with the first edition of Adam Bede that I downloaded. I started reading it, and after the first chapter, I noticed that there were words in the book that could not possibly be right. The word television appears in this version of Adam Bede that I was reading, and Adam Bede takes place in the 19th century. I think around the mid 1800s. So there's no way television should have been in there, and this made me curious. So what I did was I also then have the book downloaded through LibriVox, and I listened to that chapter, and the words on the page, on the ebook of the page, are nothing like, are well, not nothing like, but there's so many mistakes that I could not, in good conscience, read that ebook version of Adam Bede that I had and claim that I'd read the novel, because clearly, whatever program they used to scan Adam Bede and make an electronic file from which they could create this ebook. Sorry, lots of dogs out this morning. So I couldn't in good conscience claim I'd read Adam Bede if this was the ebook I read, so I had to download a different one. So my warning to you is even if you're cheap like me, look at the ebooks that come from reputable publishers. Like the ebook I'm reading now is a vintage classic, which does still have some pagination issues, but at least I'm sure the text is right. So there's a little warning for you about ebooks. As always, I watch a lot of BookTube during the week. Being retired has a lot of advantages for me in terms of reading and BookTube watching. And I saw a video over at Elle's channel, ellethinks, which I really like her channel, and I think I've shouted her out before. But she did a video this week called about the Chronicles of Narnia, which basically asked the question, why do we like this? Or why is this so popular? I'll leave a link with the right title down in the show notes down below. And I thought it was a really interesting discussion about why the Chronicles of Narnia, and I think books like that stay popular. Why they keep being read, they keep being published, etc. And so I thought I would make a response here and talk specifically about the Chronicles of Narnia, because a lot of what Elle said in her video I agreed with. Now, if you've been to Elle's channel, you probably know that Elle and I are very different in age. I'm going to guess Elle is somewhere in her mid-20s, maybe on the low end of the mid-20s, and well, I'm in my mid-50s. So there's a big gap there. And so I suspect that one reason why the Chronicles of Narnia stays popular and why people keep liking it is because they're books that we keep exposing new generations to. My reason for liking the Chronicles of Narnia have a lot to do with nostalgia. And because I had positive feelings about the Chronicles of Narnia, which I carried into adulthood, I gave those books to my kids so my kids could read them. And I think my kids read most of them. I think my daughter read all of them. My son read most of them. So I literally passed the books down to a next generation or another generation. And I have a feeling my daughter might have had enough positive feelings about them, since she's kind of the reader of my two kids right now, that she might pass them down to her kids. And in that way, they stay popular because they become kind of like nostalgic. My nostalgic feelings for the Chronicles of Narnia are wrapped up in lots of things. Number one, they were a gift from my grandmother. They came in a box set. They had, kind of what seemed to me in the 1970s to be relatively cool covers. And I had just, at the time my grandmother gave me the Chronicles of Narnia, I'd really just kind of gotten into reading. Well, around that time, I just kind of graduating from picture books into chapter books. Around that time, my grandmother gave me this box set of the Chronicles of Narnia, and I read them. And of course, the thing I loved about them most was the adventure in those stories. So, Elle went through the books and talked about the ones she liked the most and the ones she liked the least. And, our opinions are pretty similar. The Chronicles of Narnia books that I liked the most are the ones that had the most, or what I felt were the best adventures. So, for me, the best books in the Chronicles of Narnia series when I was a kid were Prince Caspian, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, and A Horse and His Boy. Now, and Elle talks about this in her video too, in the order the books were published, those were books 2, 3, 4, and 5. The books were numbered in the set that I had. Later, and I think Elle said that she was given this set when she was a kid, the books were numbered in the order in which they made sense chronologically in the story of Narnia that C.S. Lewis tells, but that's not the publication order. Like Al, I agree. The publication order is the order to read them in, and so I would start with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, and so on. But those stories were my favorite because those were just adventure stories. Kids like me find themselves in a fantasy world. They're kings and queens. They're given swords. They fight. They're mythical creatures. They go on adventures. All of that stuff appealed to me. And, I actually had a fictional crush on Susan for quite a long period of time. Yes, I am one of those people who gets fictional crushes. I have a whole video about it. Anyway, so, for me, that was the initial appeal of those stories. And like, kids do, I reread the Chronicles of Narnia over and over again. By the way, the books I like the least in the Chronicles of Narnia series are books 6 and 7, The Magician's Nephew and The Last Battle. I've read each one of those books once, but I don't think I've read, even at this point, those 2 books ever again since reading them as a kid. But, those first 5 books, and I like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe fine too. Those first 5 books I read over and over again. I would just read through those first 5 books in the series and cycle back. Sometimes I would pick one and just read that one. But I read those books over and over again. And, as Elle points out, and I'll reinforce, at some point, I picked up on the fact that there was a religious theme going on here. It's really obvious in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that Aslan is kind of a god or a Jesus-like figure who dies for the sins of others and then comes back and, creates justice and a kingdom on earth. Anyway, you see what I'm saying. And I felt, so as a kid, as I read the books, and when I picked up on that, I felt like, ooh, I know something. There's nothing more powerful than feeling like, or there are very few things more powerful. There are things that are. There are few things more powerful than feeling like you know something other people don't know. And you've picked up on something that others haven't. Now, of course, my grandmother knew that this was there. That might be part of the reason why she gave the books to me. But, I felt like I was in the know. Well, that meant that those books were really meaningful to me. This is one of the first time I read something and felt like I understood kind of a subtext to a set of books. And that made them important to me because they made me feel smart. They made me feel like I knew something. And then later, I kept rereading those books, even as I went into my kind of early and mid-teenage years, because they reminded me of Dungeons and Dragons, which, if you remember anything about fundamentalist Christianity in East Texas in the 1970s, unlike it appears in the television show Stranger Things, in the Netflix series Stranger Things, Dungeons and Dragons was really rumored to be this kind of gateway to Satanism. So it may seem odd that I associate the 2 things, Dungeons and Dragons and the Chronicles of Narnia together, but I did because, those stories that I like the most, particularly The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, and even Prince Caspian, are kind of like Dungeons and Dragons quests that you go on, and C.S. Lewis is like the dungeon master, and he's leading you through all these adventures. The Voyage of the Dawn Treader is perfect because you literally get on a ship, you travel to an island, you have an adventure, you encounter, other people, you have some, something has to be solved, some mission has to be accomplished, and you go on to the next. And so for that reason, they also then were books that I kept reading because they appealed to that kind of Dungeons and Dragon loving part of myself. And so those books became really meaningful to me, and therefore I still like them. I still, think about them. Even in my mid-50s, I pass them on to my kids out of this sense of nostalgia because those books meant something to me. I think part of the reason why they may have, I think the movies made about them helped prolong their life and create that sense of nostalgia for other people. I can't remember if Elle said she'd seen the movies or not, but if she had, I don't think that worked on her. Anyway, I just thought that was really kind of interesting, why books like that stay popular, why people still continue to read them and talk about them, and why I feel that way about them as well. I want to finish this Saturday Hodgepodge out with a segment I'm going to call Baking with Bookish. I don't know if it's ever going to come back up again, but being retired, I'm exploring all kinds of hobbies, and one of those is kind of cooking and baking, and so I made some Irish cranberry soda bread, and I'll leave that video of me making soda bread right here. Hope you enjoy Baking with British. By the way, also inspired by my love for the Great British Bake Off. Anyway, so here's me baking. As always, look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and thank you for watching.